Hey everyone, welcome to this week's lecture on The Fisher King. Something different's going on this week. Instead of giving you a very prescriptive, formal way of responding to the film in a mini paper prompt and discussion prompt, I'm leaving it wide open. I really want to let you guys sort of experiment more as you gear up towards the midterm in a couple weeks, but I also want you to have to sort of come up with your own ideas. Not that you haven't been doing that all semester, but without me even trying to shape how to respond to a film. You have the mini paper discussion prompts. Look at it. Take a look at the questions about theme, cultural work, elements of form, and then let both your papers and your discussions go where they must. And I'll of course jump in and sort of let you know what I think about all of that. So what I want to do for the Fisher King this week, instead of getting very specific about elements of form or anything like that, I want to talk a little about the director and a little bit about how this film might relate to the other movies we looked at, and sort of walk through some topics and issues as well as moments you might want to just keep an eye out for before you watch the film. First of all, we're dealing with a guy named Terry Gilliam. You might know his name. He was a founding member of Monty Python's Traveling Circus. Did I say that right? Monty Python. And all of those Monty Python movies you might or might not have watched. Quest for the Holy Grail, Life of Brian, The Meaning of Life, excuse me. So he's known for being a little wacky and being very specific. One of the things I might ask you to think about this week, and certainly next week with Psycho, the film has hundreds and hundreds of people who work on it. But some people believe that the movie is really the directors. It's not the artists, it's not the it's not the actors, it's not the screenwriter. It's the director. It's the person who tells everybody what to do, how to do it, what it's supposed to look like, etc. And I think Terry Gilliam is an interesting case to look at, to see if that's true or not, to see how that works, how one person creates a world. Terry Gilliam is very familiar and interested in this idea of fantasy versus reality. Or rather, I said that wrong. I don't think he cares about fantasy versus reality. I think he would say everyone's perspective on the world is a fantasy. There's no such thing as reality. Reality is something we actually dream about, we think about, we use empirical sciences, we do what we can to sort of create a world we all agree on. But the second you get two people into a room, the nature of reality can change. Or rather, their beliefs about the nature of reality can be wildly, wildly, wildly different. And I think for Terry Gilliam, that's something to think about, that's interesting, that's important. If you're not realizing that your life is your own little fantasy and not quote unquote real, that you might go and tell a story about something that's not objectively accurate, or your fears and insecurities might color how you hear people and how you think about things. Your own sort of individual mythic world, kind of like Shawshank Redemption. I try to say that prison sequence was really Andy's perception of life, not necessarily life. Terry Gilliam pushes that, except instead of making it just about one individual's mind, he starts framing a world that feels weird. You're going to see, not for the first time in the semester, but close, a lot of handheld cameras. Cameras that are wibbly wobbly and sort of fall, and different lenses. And that's something I'm not going to get into because it's very sort of technical throughout the course, but every different lens you can put on a camera can change greatly the way the image is created. So you're going to see some images that look fuzzy and look strange and look warped and sort of, what's the word? Walleye-eyed. So it's sort of transformed through the lens. So those are the types of things that Terry Gilliam might play with for us. Now, let me back up. The way The Fisher King deals specifically with the fantasy versus reality thing is the story of Pinocchio. I hope you guys are familiar with it. We have an Italian doll maker, an Italian doll. The doll gets some life, but it's still kind of a wooden doll. And the whole idea is it's trying to be, quote unquote, a real boy. What's interesting about that film, if you've watched it or if you're familiar with any of the source material, what makes him real isn't his body, it's his ethics. It's his way of thinking, right? We'll talk about humanity later in the film, later in the course, because we have a couple of very powerful, strange films to watch about this. But the basic concept, we use human in two very different ways. Sometimes, I'm only human, which means, oh, I'm sorry I cheated on you, I'm sorry I killed your neighbor, I'm sorry I screwed you over, I'm only human, what do you want? Kind of a get out of jail free card to say, all of us kind of innately suck, and we can fall back on that. Or, we need to come together with our universal humanity and show whatever alien force or whatever we're fighting that our human nature is stronger than, well, I thought our human nature was to be horrible and screw everyone over and get us out of trouble. Again, I'm being snarky, sorry. But do you see the question and the problem with how we will use a definition of the word human to get us out of the most trouble or give us the most power in any given situation? That's something that Terry Gilliam wants to think about and ask us to work through a little bit through Pinocchio. He's also thinking about how contemporary film deals with trauma. I think this film yells at us a little bit. It criticizes us, and it says we're very bad at dealing with other people's pain. We don't want to listen to it. We want to believe we already understand it. We will never take responsibility for causing it, even if I can slap you in the face and then tell you you're a bad person for telling me that I hurt you, because now you hurt my feelings. I don't want to believe that I hurt anybody. Again, I'd be a little snarky. And as the course goes on, you're getting to see a little bit more of my in-class personality. I did a quick side note about that. Everything I say in these little mini lectures, these aren't about truth or facts. This is about ideas, ways of thinking. So I'll sort of get into character sometimes and walk through a way of thinking. For example, if I get into the vibe of a serial killer, I'm not actually talking about killing and eating people. I'm saying that from a certain point of view, this is how we might want to think about that. I'm digging a big asshole for myself, but hopefully that's okay. Let's move on. Some other things that Terry Gilliam's going to ask you to think about regarding trauma and pain is some of the backdrops of the 1980s and 1990s, which are Gulf Wars, wars in the Gulf, the Vietnam conflict, the AIDS crisis, specifically in New York and San Francisco, and how we didn't understand what was happening there. So a lot of people dying in lots of sort of horrifying, very scary ways for North America. And he plays with that in some provocative moments. Okay, what to watch out for in the film? First thing to look for in the film, sorry, I just want to move up a couple of my notes here. The first thing I would ask you to think about in the movie is going to be clowns. What is a clown? How does a clown work? You're going to see characters quite physically clowning up, putting white makeup on their faces, etc. They're never actually clowns, but visually that's the cue we get. An example, early on in the film we have a radio personality named Jack Lucas, and he's almost going to be on television. He has a television interview for a show, an audition. So he's practicing. And that show, like many sitcoms, has a catchphrase, a sort of a line that's always supposed to get laughs at any point. And the line here is, "Forgive me." Kind of sarcastically screams out, "Hey, forgive me," which is a way to say, I don't really want forgiveness. I'm actually telling you to F off. Sorry, I almost flipped you all off. Sorry. Not me actually trying to flip off anyone who's actually watching this video. But it's kind of an F you, right? If you're saying forgive me sarcastically, you're actually making a very violent act towards that other person. Well, our main character, Jack, is in the bath. So you think about that. He's trying to purify himself. And he's putting this like face lotion on because he's going to be filmed for the first time. And he's repeating over and over and over again, "Forgive me, forgive me," as if he's reading a script and trying to wonder, how should I deliver this line? What he's completely unaware of is, one, he's a clown right now. He has put on the white clown makeup. He's not really human. He's a metaphor for a type of part of himself. But also, he keeps repeating the words "forgive me" without ever really asking for forgiveness. And so that's kind of interesting. The film ends up being about asking for forgiveness. What does it mean to want to be forgiven? What does it mean to forgive yourself? What does it mean to ask forgiveness from the world, from your culture, from any divine forces you may or may not believe in, etc.? Okay, so think about clowns throughout the film. And that leads us to our next subject, which is performance. One of the most famous clowns we've had in the last 50 years has been Robin Williams, the comedian and actor. He's one of the stars of the film, and many of his lines are improv. He's sort of making things up in the moment. He's trying to embody this character. And I don't want to say much about that character. I really want you to sort of follow his cool journey throughout the film. But his performance, the choices he makes, perhaps specifically regarding language and body image, body choices. He strips naked at one point in the film and starts dancing around. I'll let you watch that. But think about what he's doing there as performance, what choices are being made, and what that does to us as an audience. Jeff Bridges also gives a very cool, interesting performance as sort of almost a Satan figure, a figure who's been cast out from heaven and trying to find his way back. Maybe to realize that he doesn't want to be back there in the first place. And in this case, heaven means rich celebrity. We also get Amanda Plummer and Mercedes Ruehl, two extraordinarily powerful actresses. Quick side note about this. We haven't talked about representation yet, the ways in which a certain identity category is represented in a film. How are black people represented in this film? How are white middle class people represented? How are Native American people represented, etc.? And we'll talk about that very specifically because we have a film that's directly about that later on. But I want us to start thinking about it here, especially if you're interested in it, because I think Amanda and Mercedes give not only remarkable performances as two different types of females in the early 90s, but I would argue that these aren't types of people. They're people. They are full-fledged, thoughtful ways of looking at the world with their own beliefs and insecurities, and their psychologies are very, very complex. And in my mind, that's the best way to deal with wonderful representation, is you show how complex representation can be, and you force us to grapple with things beyond what's simple and ordinary. So you can watch all those performances. Something else to look out for, the film's very much about a class divide, rich, poor, but also very rich and homeless. There are a lot of homeless people in the film. And I'm not sure, you can decide this, whether those homeless people are represented in a way that is respectful, or whether they're supposed to be amped up, almost cartoon characters, to talk about and think about the homeless. Quick side note about this, later in the film, one of our stars is going to be asked to star in a TV show called Home Free. And it's supposed to be this beautiful, fun, wacky TV show about how the homeless are really the free people in America. They're the luckiest people in America. Their lives are so awesome because they don't have taxes and bills and, the small everyday discomforts of, having enough money to have food and comfort and security and heat and stuff like that. So the film seems to be mocking itself or questioning itself. And, Terry Gilliam asking myself, am I treating the homeless well in this film? Am I asking us to deal with things in a way that's helpful, not just typecasting them, stereotyping them, and moving on? Or worse, putting them as a metaphor for what I want to think about. So homelessness is very, very important. Celebrity power is very, very important. There's lots of glass in the movie, people looking in and out of glass windows, glass rooms, etc. So that's something you might want to watch out for. And then the last two things. How am I doing on time here? All right, we'll be done by 15 minutes. Psychology is something the film asks us to think about. What is a certain psychological point of view? How does the mind work? And instead of saying the mind just works the way it works, that's all there is to it, the film seems to really question what shapes mind, what develops mind, or maybe even more importantly, what stops the mind from developing in a way that's healthy? What external force gets in the way? And those are the types of questions that I think the film is asking us. But lastly, and I hope you've hung in there this whole time because this is probably the most important part of this little mini lecture. So important, I had to put down my coffee and pick up a pen I will not use. Friedrich Nietzsche, 20th century philosopher, talked about the bungled and the botched. And you'll hear a little discussion of this in the film. And for him, this was the hoi polloi, the normal, the everyday, the working person who has no power or significance in the grand scheme of things. And Nietzsche wasn't saying that to judge. He's saying that as the way we structure the world is that the vast majority of us do a buttload of work, get very little back in return, and end up sort of lonely and depressed, and we don't know what to do about it. And Nietzsche would call those the bungled and the botched. And then there's a handful of people, maybe a couple thousand people globally, who seem to get the power, the prestige that we might all like. And what do you do with that? Is that just the way the world is? Is Nietzsche wrong? Is that a certain perspective that you can have about the world that might help you change it? Or might that make you despair and just fall into that category? Is talking about the bungled and the botched a way to lose all hope and to be, how do I say it? In some ways, being disenfranchised, apathetic, and lazy is the easiest thing to do because you can always believe in your potential. Oh man, if people could only understand how great I am, how amazing I am, how smart I am, how whatever, but then you don't do anything, so you never actually have to be judged. So in your heart, you are the best, most amazing person ever, and the world just never gave you a chance. But maybe by accepting that bungled and botched point of view, you took the risk out of the equation, etc. And I want to be clear, I am not talking about pull yourself up from your bootstraps sort of discussion. I'm not talking about people needing help or anything like that. I'm just talking about psychology, the way we frame and think about the world, and how that might influence us to either change it or just adapt to what we have. And then the last thing, the title, The Fisher King. This is a reference to the King Arthur legends. And I won't retell the story here because Robin Williams gives a gorgeous retelling. I beg you to watch and watch and watch Robin Williams' performance as he speaks out the story of the Fisher King. And have a reading of that. I would love to see some essays and some discussions on what that little myth is all about. Again, I don't want to get into it here, but please, please, please think about it. the quests that they talk about, the cup of water they talk about, and of course, at the very center of that story is the center of this lecture, which is the ideal of the clown or the fool, and the significance of the fool in our personal lives and contemporary culture. Thanks so much, guys, for hanging in there and listening to all of this. Have fun with the Fisher King. I really look forward to seeing what your discussions are all about next week, or